Imagine drug discovery and biologics manufacturing like a gold rush. The companies that become famous are the ones that launch therapies. But the rush only works because someone sells the picks, shovels, and machinery. That enabling layer is life science tools and bioprocessing systems. These businesses sell the instruments, consumables, software, and GMP-grade production equipment that labs and biopharma factories need to discover, test, and manufacture therapies. They sit upstream of hospitals, powering what happens before products reach patients. Inside this block are 4 connected groups. First are analytical instruments and lab platforms, chromatography, mass spectrometry, PCR and NGS preparation workflows, sample handling, and lab automation. Second are reagents and lab consumables, assay kits, enzymes, buffers, plastics, columns, and filters. Third are bioprocessing systems for biologics, single-use bioreactors, filtration, chromatography skids, tubing and assemblies, sensors, and process analytics. And fourth is lab software and informatics, LIMS and ELN systems, data analysis, workflow orchestration, and quality documentation. What they sell typically falls into 4 revenue buckets: capital equipment, that is often a big one-time purchase; recurring consumables that get reordered as workflows run; service and support like maintenance, calibration, validation help, and uptime guarantees; and software and data sold through subscriptions and workflow tools. To ground the block, here are 10 listed examples. Illustrative, not recommendations. Thermo Fisher Scientific, broad tools, reagents, services. Danaher, life science and bioprocessing franchises. Sartorius, bioprocess equipment and consumables strong in single use. Repligen, bioprocess components like filtration, chromatography, and single use. Repligen, what diligence toward richer data and software. And Oxford Nanopore Technology. Let's anchor the scale using the attached market charts, then connect that growth to the real activity engine: research, clinical trials, and biologics manufacturing, before we unpack the business models. A common life science tools view puts the market at about $168 billion in 2024, growing toward about $401 billion by 2033, or roughly 10% CAGR. You can see this in the first attached chart. Life science tools market size by technology, 2023 to 2033. It shows $167.8 billion in 2024, $184.3 billion in 2025, and $401.0 billion by 2033. Inside the broader tools world, a fast-growing sub-pocket is single-use bioprocessing, $31.7 billion in 2024, growing to $74.1 billion by 2030, or roughly 15% CAGR. The fourth attached chart, single-use bioprocessing market size by product, 2020 to 2030, highlights $31.7 billion in 2024, $36.1 billion in 2025, and $74.1 billion in 2030. So far, we've defined the block and anchored its growth with the 2 market charts. Next, we'll place it in the value chain and use clinical trial activity to explain why demand tends to pull through into consumables and services. In the value chain, this block supports 2 phases: discovery and development, and GMP manufacturing. It enables therapies that later drive demand for diagnostics, devices, and hospital care. Clinical trials are a key connector because more trials usually means more sample processing, more testing, and more data workflows, which means more consumables burn and more service demand. ClinicalTrials.gov lists 560,000 plus studies globally, and the third chart makes that tangible. The chart on percentage of registered studies by location shows 561,143 studies. The pie chart also shows this is global activity with a large share outside the U.S., plus U.S.-only studies and trials that span both U.S. and non-U.S. sites. Now we've covered what it is, how big it is, and what activity drives demand. Next comes the investor's core question: how do these businesses make money? What makes revenue sticky? And what tends to drive margins and returns? Most companies blend models, but 3 patterns show up again and again. First is installed base plus consumables, the razor and razor blade idea. An instrument platform gets placed. Then recurring revenue comes from reagents, kits, columns, filters, single-use assemblies, and service that run on that platform. This is why consumables can dominate the profit pool. Some market views put consumables at around half of category revenue. Second is the bioprocessing workflow vendor model. The goal is to get qualified inside a manufacturer's validated GMP process. Once embedded, recurring spend can be extremely sticky because switching can require revalidation and can introduce yield or contamination risk. Third is the services and software layer. Maintenance, application support, workflow software, and data platforms raise switching costs and reduce churn. The best versions make the vendor part of the customer's operating system, not just a supplier. To support these models, capital is tied up in R&D, new assay chemistries, instruments, sensors, software, in manufacturing and quality systems, especially for GMP consumables, in technical sales and application teams, and in supply chain and inventory where availability matters. The economic logic is driven by a few levers. Consumables attachment, meaning recurring spend per installed instrument or per production run, switching costs from validation, training, and data compatibility, uptime and reliability because downtime is extremely expensive, manufacturing scale and quality, and differentiation in accuracy, speed, yield, and contamination risk reduction. Zooming out, the biggest demand drivers are biopharma R&D intensity, the shift toward biologics and complex modalities like cell gene and mRNA, clinical trial volume and complexity, and regulation and GMP requirements, which raise barriers but also raise compliance costs. Automation, workflow software, and AI enablement matter too, because labs are under pressure to do more with fewer skilled staff. A reality check on mature economics. Large-scale tools players can run 20% plus adjusted operating margins in good years. One example in the analysis is Thermo Fisher at about 22.6% adjusted operating margin in 2024. This is also where ease of entry matters. The low end can be crowded. Basic plastics, generic reagents, and commodity-like items are easier to enter, so margins are lower. The high end is harder. GMP bioprocess consumables, validated workflows, and premium instruments require strong quality systems, deep application know-how, long qualification cycles, and an installed ecosystem. New entrants can win niches, but it's difficult to displace incumbents once a workflow is qualified in GMP production. We've covered products, growth, and economics. Next, we'll focus on customers. Who buys what, how often, and what they cut first in a downturn, because this is what makes the block feel in between defensive healthcare and cyclical tech. The main customers are pharma and biotech, R&D labs and manufacturing sites, CDMOs and CMOs, contract manufacturers, academic and government labs, grant-funded, and clinical and industrial testing labs, including food, environment, and forensics. Stickiness follows the product type. Consumables are used daily or weekly, so they're highly recurring. Instruments are bought on multi-year cycles, but once installed, they lock in through trained staff, validated methods, and data comparability over time. Bioprocessing consumables can be the stickiest, because changing them can force revalidation and can risk yield loss. Order sizes vary, but directionally, instruments are often tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars per system. Consumables are smaller orders but frequent replenishment, and bioprocessing consumables can become very large once production scales. Choice also varies. For commodity items, buyers have many options and negotiate hard. For workflow-critical items, like certain columns, assay chemistry, or validated single-use assemblies, there are fewer credible choices and customers prioritize reliability and continuity. Because there isn't one clean customer count, investors track activity proxies. One is research funding. The NIH chart breaks budget authority into categories. RPGs at 26, $221 million, 58.34%. Intramural research at 4, $925 million, 10.96%. R&D contracts at 3, $743 million, 8.33%. Other research at 3, $136 million, 6.98%. Research training at $979 million, 5.4%. Another proxy is clinical trial volume, 560,000 plus studies, shown as 561, 143, as of the 11th of December, 2025. A third is biopharma R&D momentum, with IQVIA noting continued increases in large pharma R&D spending and improving funding dynamics. Now we'll connect those customer patterns to macro sensitivity with a simple if-then framework, and we'll keep the transition short. Instruments are the first thing delayed, while consumables and GMP critical spend tend to be protected. This block is in between defensive healthcare and cyclical tech. If biotech funding tightens or rates rise, early-stage biotechs often delay capex first, so instrument orders slow, while consumables and service tend to hold up better. If big pharma pipelines expand, demand for analytical tools and bioprocess capacity rises, supporting utilization and pricing for differentiated consumables. If governments squeeze research budgets, academia delays upgrades, so NIH policy and budget shifts can matter. If clinical trial counts rise, sample processing grows, increasing consumables burn and service demand. If supply chains wobble, customers dual source and prioritize reliability. Vendors with strong manufacturing and distribution can win share. Behaviorally, customers postpone big instruments before they cut entirely, but they try not to disrupt validated workflows. And the most must-have spend is GMP production uptime, because a failed batch is far more expensive than the consumables bill. What has changed in the last 3 to 5 years is mainly about productivity and integration. Labs want higher throughput with fewer skilled staff, pushing automation and standardized workflows. Customers increasingly want end-to-end solutions, not just a tool, but a workflow plus support plus software. Subscription-like models such as service bundles, software, and leasing have grown, turning more CapEx into OpEx. Single-use bioprocessing adoption has accelerated because it shortens changeovers and supports multi-product facilities. At the same time, rising biologics complexity increases demand for advanced analytics and tighter process control. FDA biologics approval listings are one reference point for the ongoing flow of biologic products. And the balance of power has shifted toward vendors that provide validated, integrated, repeatable workflows, while commodity providers face more procurement pressure. To close, here's the forward view in 3 time horizons and 3 qualitative scenarios. Near term, the engine stays the same: R&D activity, clinical trials, and biologics manufacturing, with consumables as the recurring backbone and switching costs keeping workflows stable. Instruments can slow if budgets tighten, while automation, software, and single-use systems keep gaining share. Medium term, installed base plus consumables plus service remains the dominant model. GMP validation continues to create durable moats, and growth comes from more process analytics and real-time monitoring, CDMO expansion that creates concentrated super customers, and stronger data and workflow ecosystems based on compatibility and reproducibility. Long-term, biology stays complex, so customers keep paying for confidence. Consumables remain the profit pool. Manual lab work declines as automation becomes standard. Portable and distributed platforms broaden, where sequencing-like workflows can happen, and consolidation continues as large players buy niche innovators to complete workflows, a pattern Reuters has highlighted. In an upside scenario, innovation accelerates, trials grow, funding stays supportive, and tools demand compounds. Integrated workflow leaders with high consumables attachment and strong service quality win. In a base scenario, growth stays mid to high single digit. Instruments swing, but consumables and service smooth results. And switching costs plus quality requirements preserve attractive returns for differentiated players. In a downside scenario, funding or regulatory shocks keep instrument demand weak for longer, procurement pushes harder on price, and some segments face overbuilt capacity. NIH policy or budget uncertainty is one channel that can ripple into tools demand, and commodity-heavy or narrow point solution players feel the most pain. So the beginner takeaway is simple. This is the picks and shovels layer behind drug discovery and biologics manufacturing. It's large, about $168 billion in 2024, moving toward about $401 billion by 2033, and it includes fast-growing pockets like single-use bioprocessing, projected from $31.7 billion in 2024 to $74.1 billion by 2030. When you evaluate any company here, the key question is where it sits: commodity items with many choices, or validated workflows where reliability, compliance, and uptime make switching hard.